Okay, hello everyone. Let me introduce our photographer, Mark Grob, who will tell you about his way and his love in photography.
That's about as much Russian as I can do, and that only in writing. So I apologize for that, and I hope all of you understand English fairly well over the course of the next couple of minutes or so. There's a lot of English, okay? Well, I thought I'd start with something weird, and the Vice President of the United States calling me a son of a bitch should have filled that gap. Often when I'm in a situation like that, and it happens really all the time, like maybe also now in this very moment, I ask myself, I was never supposed to be here. My life started in a different place, and I want to first kind of make an arc through where I came from and how I came to photography and then how everything developed. I grew up in Switzerland, but that's me with my mom. Unfortunately not in a scenic surrounding like this. I grew up in a place called Alton. And Alton is about as scenic as, I don't know, the suburbs of a very, I mean, probably in Siberia somewhere. And in this time, it's in the 60s, what you see here is not a film still from Mad Men. It's actually my parents and their friends trying to have fun. And in an environment like this, is having a dream, like photographing movie stars and presidents, is about as out there like a conspiracy theory. And I think it's really sad, if you think about it, that you have a dream like as simple as that, and you wouldn't tell it to your friends, to your brother, to your parents. I think a lot of people have that thing, and I share that with many, many people around the world. And I think it makes me sad, and always when I see young people and have lectures to young people, I'm in particularly fun to encourage people to live their dreams and to go ahead with it. So my first thing, I started everything first, I was totally into music. And I rehearsed like a mad person. I trained so hard. And I wanted to be a rock star. But at the same time, I started to be a stagehand. So I worked at concerts to get a little bit of money on the weekends. And in this time, we worked with the biggest bands of the era, Queen and AC/DC and all these bands. And one day, I got a little bit early to the venue. And while walking in, there was this guy, and he said, like, oh, Grob, you play the guitar. You should go in and see this guy rehearse. And I went in, and I saw a guy playing, and in this moment, I knew I will not be and never will be a rock star. I don't have what it takes. I'm not good enough. No matter how much I train and how long I let grow my hair and have the moves and everything, it's just not enough. I will never be a rock star. And I think that was very painful, but at the same time, it was very, very important for me to understand it's not important what I want to be, it's important what I am. And at the same stage, where my dream of being a rock star ended, I understood that I had access. So I saw people like Queen rehearse, and so I had a camera, and I thought, like, I use this access to make pictures, and at the same place where this one dream ended, a much more important one for my life actually started, at the very same place. And this time, I hope so at least, it's not what I want to be, but being a photographer is absolutely what I am. So I was falling for her for photography. It was like a love romance, okay? You see her and your glass falls out of your hand and you don't know, you cannot sleep because you want to be with her. And you know that when you give everything you have, she's so much bigger and more better than me. And if I'm lucky, she looks at me once and gives me a twink. She will not sleep with me. She will maybe look at me. And I learned in these years to understand that's way enough. Instead of photographer, my parents made me do mechanical engineering. When I asked my father and said, I want to be a photographer, he looked at me and said, are you gay? That shows you not only how good of a pedagogue my father was, but also kind of a little bit the mindset of the world I grew up in. My engineering studies ended on April 25th, 1985, exactly at 6:31 in the evening. And that's not a joke, I don't make that up. I look back, and that was the last time ever that I would do something I would not explicitly love. But then again, I went to California pretty much the next month, and I became a photographer's assistant. Came back to Switzerland because my father died. I had to go back to Switzerland and open my first studio. But instead of doing, and again, instead of doing what I wanted to do, I did this. Chimpanzees making coffee. Okay, you guys are advertisers, okay? But that's how I spent my life for the first 20 years of my career. And I decided that at some point, that's not what I started. That's not why I started photography. So in this time, the pressure on me was bigger, getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I needed replacement drugs. I started to fly planes, and I started to make aerobatics, and I flew wilder and wilder, but nothing would kind of distract from the fact that what I actually wanted to do is portray work. Because that was the one thing I knew is in me, maybe the one little thing which is in me, which seemed ridiculously easy. And, oh. Well, that's not ridiculously easy. So, here we go. And finally, in 2003, I quit my partnership with my friends in the studio doing advertising photography. I left Switzerland. I started Wonder Years to build up my career to do editorial work. And in 2008, I finally moved to the place where I always knew I have to move if I want to do my job real, and that was to New York, and it was very, very scary at first. Why am I here in Moscow, you will ask? Well, the reason for it is I'm making a film. And I'm making a film about an astronaut, Scott Kelly. He goes to space for 1 year. He starts next week in Baikonur. I leave tomorrow morning at 4 o'clock to Baikonur. And Scott, which we followed him over the last 3 months and met his girlfriend and do a film with all of these people over a period of a year. Until he comes back, hopefully healthy in a year from now in Baikonur. And I showed you here actually pretty exclusively the trailer. There's some footage we still replace, but I wanted to share that with you. Oh, that I wanted to first say, my first recallable memory is the moon landing. The first thing I can recall with a time. So imagine what it means to me to do what I do now and did in the last couple of weeks here in Star City.
I do sometimes dream of being in space. I'll wake up and I'll tell Miko, hey, I had this dream I was launching on the space shuttle or the space station. And sometimes there are people with me, like she's been with me in my dreams, my kids have. But in reality, while I'm up there, most of humanity is 250 miles below you. If anything goes wrong on Earth, you're not coming home.
Last month we launched a new spacecraft as part of a re-energized space program that will send American astronauts to Mars. And in 2 months, Scott Kelly will begin a year-long stay in space. So good luck, Captain. We're proud of you.
There's no sun on your face. You never feel this on my feet. This fire. You never feel this cool breeze. It's always exactly the same. It just makes me think of how long a year really is.
It's just such a different thing when there's someone you know and someone you love right there at the pointy tip of that rocket.
I cannot compare it to anything else I've ever done. I mean, when you're launching a rocket ship, it's just incredible.
3, 2, 1.
I remember wanting to be an astronaut from when I was a little kid. You know, I think twins tend to be a little bit different. When we were little, we had like our own secret language.
I call him much more when I'm in space than I do on Earth.
He gets to talk to his brother that also understands what he's going to be experiencing.
I'll be in space and flying all the way around the sun, you know, 1 lap in a year. And he's like, yeah, so will I. The rest of us will be doing the same thing on Spaceship Earth. Being part of this 1-year mission is to understand how to live and work in space for longer periods of time so we can eventually go to Mars.
The International Space Station is a conglomeration of 5 different agencies, 15 different countries. It's the largest peacetime international project ever in human history.
Even though the space station is really a magical place to live and work, you definitely miss people on Earth. You just feel like you're so far away, you need to try to maintain some kind of a connection. A lot can happen in a year. The biggest concern that I have, it's not really my personal safety, it's about something happening to somebody on the ground and then not being able to be there for them.
I don't think he was expecting that his sister-in-law was nearly assassinated. I think that's one of the challenging things about being away that long is just you're completely out of control over anything and there's nothing you can do to help.
You want to know how long a year is? It's 31.6 million seconds. It'll be 31.6 million times you're on my mind.
A lot of things that are very worthy endeavors do have risk, and I think it's important for our species to maintain our explorer mindset, to continue to push our boundaries of technology and experience.
What we're doing in orbit is what's helping us hold us together as a planet.
I feel pretty fortunate that I'm here and I get to risk it all one more time.
So that's the reason why I'm in Moscow. And, oh, thank you. Thank you very much. As I said, for a guy of my generation, to have open doors to Roscosmos, to be in Star City last week, here to work with cosmonauts and astronauts and have parties with them and share vodka with them, is more than I ever could have dreamed in my absolute wildest dreams. And also this last week, we worked with your legends, with Alexei Leonov, which was featured in Time. His 50th anniversary of his first spacewalk in human history is here. And we did that also last week. Here's his suit, which is in the museum here, his original suit. And for me, it was really boys time to do this kind of thing. Here, Gagarin, Yuri Gagarin's original capsule and the heartbeat on the original EKG the moment he took off, his heartbeat. And I thought it was so wonderful to have that in front of me. Yuri Gagarin. So more and more over my life, I got this weird front row seat on history and time. And of all the things I possess, with love of people and my health, this is the one thing I cherish the most. It's more than money for me, and more than anything else could ever matter. And that's my front row seat on history and time. And it's sometimes really crazy because those extremes are very close together. So we, for example, last year in February, we got the job to go to Paris to photograph the French president. And so we traveled and we photographed him at the Élysée Palace. And that was in January 25th, 2014. And then 2 weeks later, almost like actually 10 days later, I found myself in Mali, West Africa, in a bomb crater in one of Gaddafi's houses. Muammar Gaddafi had houses in Mali. Don't ask me why. But the French sent 3 laser-guided bombs in his houses. And those bombs, and I guarantee you that, were signed off at that very desk I was photographing him 10 days before. And so for me, sometimes that stretch in history and time is really pretty extreme. And we come to places, and often for me, again there, I photograph sometimes my feet on the ground to remind myself the next day that I was there, because I'm Swiss, I'm not even, again there, I should not, I was not supposed to be there. I was last week in the Kremlin, and here in the Oval Office, and I want to quickly share what that was like going to the Oval Office, because it was actually pretty funny. After we got in, we got to this woman. This woman came to us and said, okay, no blocks, no close-up, no tripods, no lights, no much noise. So that's pretty much everything I do. So I had to improvise, and I photographed President Obama through curtains and glass which was around in the vase, in order to make it look like, as the Russians would have sent a spy over, and made this little spy story with it, just to have not normal AP pictures. And often in my world, I'm very much forced to improvise, and even though I live, of course, I earn my money with advertising too. I mostly do film advertising. I did stuff like the Avengers, movie posters. I do movie posters pretty much. The Avengers or the new Terminator I did, or stuff like that. So that's how I earn my money with, and then everything is well prepared. But here, I have to improvise pretty much everything. So portrait work, finally, I came to this point where I would do portrait work. And there's some stations, and one of them I wanted to bring to you. And one is the last sitting Steve Jobs made. I had the honor to do with actually him. And I brought you here actually, and that you see how quick that actually takes. I brought you here the whole last sitting, the whole, from him walking in and he walks out. And don't worry, it doesn't take long. And see down there is the timeline, the frame rate, so you can see exactly how long it takes. So it's also an interesting study from a body posture and everything. So he walks in, of course we're very well prepared. And by the time I shook his hand, I knew exactly that he has a very short attention span. This is the one thing I have. I kind of can read people pretty quickly, obviously, and then I would turn around to my assistant and say, this has to go really quick. Now look at the timeline, 33 seconds after he walked in, 36, 7, 8, 42 seconds after he walked in. That was the cover. That was the cover. I did maybe 5 frames like that, 6 frames like that. Then we changed the light. We did 3 lighting situations, gray and white backdrop. And you will see it changes now to the white backdrop. And look at his body shape. I ask him one more time whether he can change his position. Look, he was done. He was done. I'm done with this guy. 1 frame, 2 frames maybe. Okay, whole shoot, 3 minutes, 48 seconds. And thank you. So that's how we normally have to roll. And we worked this week with Leonov. We maybe made this whole pictures you saw before in 5 minutes. I like to do this because people they're fresh, and actually the attention span, whether a person is very famous or not, or I would photograph a person on the street, is pretty much the same. It's after 5 minutes, people get really, really easily bored. So I started my collaboration with Time magazine a while ago, and now I'm one of 4 contract photographers with them. I've worked with a lot of different magazines. When I came here to Moscow, I was actually delighted to see a cover of GQ with Kevin Spacey. I didn't know that it was even on there, to be honest. But I work for GQ, I work for Vogue, I work for National Geographic, for many magazines. But with Time, I have a very special bond. I often pitch them stories. So the story with the astronaut, for example, I brought to them. It was happening because I wanted to do it. And I always encourage students, do stories you really personally love and are affected by, because those you want to do even when it gets very hard and when it gets really tough to do them. One of the most successful stories for Time, and also for me, was actually Time Beyond 9/11, which was the first all-out 360 multimedia project ever a magazine did like this. And so was the first time we really incorporated motion, and we started very early in the process. When I saw who is on the list of all these people we have to photograph, I knew this is going to be a documentary. So we made a film, we made a TV film, we made, of course, the magazine, a book, an iPad application, and an own website. And that was the first time in history that a magazine did that. And since then, I could not do anything else but multimedia. The moment you walk out of the silence as a photographer is an amazing place. It's amazing. It's an amazing time we live in, actually, after this revolution of new media coming in, sound and music. It's just beautiful. It's really, really exciting and beautiful. Here's some pictures. I agree with her. Arrest Janie first. All my dear friends from the former government. He was the person who led the raid to the assassination of bin Laden. And he was the commander in Afghanistan. So often we meet the whole circle of people. For me, the most beautiful thing I can do is when I work with my personal heroes. And they don't need necessarily to be famous, but they sometimes often change the world, either for women's rights, for minority rights, or for of course, human rights in general. So I want to share with you a piece. I don't know whether you guys in Russia here are familiar with these people, but I made a piece for Time with the people who fought with Martin Luther King in the march to Washington. And I want to bring you an example of one guy in particular which moved us very much. The story called One Dream, and it's also a multimedia project.
My name's Bob Zellner, and I grew up in LA, Lower Alabama. And I was very lucky, even though my father was in the Klan and my grandfather was in the Klan, that I joined the Civil Rights Movement and became the first white Southerner to be a field secretary for SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. In the first 36 months of my work with SNCC, 5 of my colleagues were lynched, murdered, killed by racists. I was beaten so severely on a number of occasions that I suffered some brain damage and also post-traumatic stress. October the 4th, 1961. You know how you always remember the first time you were ever beaten and arrested? It was a SNCC staff meeting, the first staff meeting ever held by SNCC. My job was actually to go to white campuses and to relate to white students across the South. During the meeting, 130 high school students walked out of school to protest the murder of Herbert Lee. Herbert Lee had been murdered because he was helping Bob Moses register black people to vote, and I joined them. I was the only white person in that demonstration. And I remember thinking that I couldn't possibly go on that demonstration. I said, my mother will lose her teaching job, my father will lose his church, and you know, there'll be more violence than usual. And then I realized I'm talking to myself because nobody's telling me to go on the march anyway. But the decision I had to make was, am I going to be a part of this or not? So I did. And the violence was so awful. They had hangman's ropes, and they stopped us at the city hall. And they began to arrest the students, and a small group of Klansmen surrounded me and began to hit me. And then a huge mob formed in the street with bricks and pipes and baseball bats, and they kept shouting, "Bring him here, we'll kill him." And they started carrying me into the street, and I held on. I grabbed onto the rail that was down the city hall steps. And luckily I was in good shape, and I was highly motivated. Now I know that if they pull me loose from this rail, I will die. So they would pull, and when they pulled, I would hold on, and when they came back, I would actually move up the rail. And I got so frustrated that one person from behind me came over the back of my head with this, and he started reaching into my eyeball to try to get a hold of my eyeball. And he would work it out so he almost had it. So he was going to blind me, you know. And I would move in a certain way, and it would thunk back into my head. A white Southerner was not supposed to step out of line because we were supposed to accept segregation and accept it happily. But if you didn't, you could lose your sight, you could lose your life.
Bob Stelner. Thank you. As I said, personal heroes of mine, people who try to change society from what they thought is wrong, they didn't care whether they finally die or whatever, or imprisoned. And for me, it's a great honor and a great pleasure to meet and to face those people. I cannot come here without telling about Gaga's exploding bra on a little bit lighter note. So a lot of people, you know, over the years, things happen, a lot of Photoshop is used, and to be honest, I'm not a big fan of it. I like photography. I like to make things in camera. I tell to my students, be proud on your RAW file. Photograph that you be proud of your RAW file. That I could give you my RAW file and you think, okay, he's a photographer, you know, trained that you do this and not Photoshop. And I tried to show you with this how actually this photo of Lady Gaga came together. A lot of people think it's a lot of retouch. You see the exploding bra? And actually, I really swear to God, there's almost none, just very, very basic, not even on the skin, a lot of retouch. And are you ready? I show you how we did it. I am ready. 3, 2, 1, and... Thank you. Well, again, there you see how quick it is, and it needs to be quick. You cannot do this forever and ever and ever. And the result was used like all over. It was printed like 76 times all over the world. Here in GQ, I think it's Italy, and there's really, you could see the raw file. It's really not much retouch. Movie stars, of course, I told you before, I do a lot of for magazines also, but then again, I want to live, also have a good life, and do interesting work at the same time with astronauts, which pays actually nothing. So I have to somehow compensate, and so I work with movie stars, which is a lot of fun, I must say. And I'll show you some. In these, I always try to do alternative lights, you know. And for example, I brought you here Cluni, and you see my assistants hold the light manually. That when he moves, we can move. So it's like a person is not a still life. When he moves, the light has to move. We cannot be static in this. And you saw that a little bit. So I do even to light somebody from below. George gets away with it. But I try to really always try to do alternative lightings. Here with Leo DiCaprio, also handheld after shooting for Tag Heuer watches, done after like also a minute actually in the end of the shoot. And I want to show you a case study how actually sometimes the story evolves. We have here Dean Norris, who you might know from Breaking Bad. That was exactly what the magazine asked me to do. You know, they wanted to make a double side spread where he looks really evil and on the other side very fun. And you know, you do this, but this takes really honestly a minute. With a good actor like Dean, it takes a minute and you have done that. So where could you push it, you know? And so we try to emphasize the whole thing with light. Just with means of, again, their handhold lighting, with light from low, but then with cross versa, have the happy face lit from below and have the not so happy face lit from above. And I have great fun actually doing this. So this is done in another like 5 minutes. So I try to do this, you know. He could scream at himself to show this aggressiveness and passiveness. And again, this also doesn't take really long. And then we ended up doing this. And he did that in just pushing actually his nose in. And we shot him like this, and then like on the other side with a little bit less of a push. So very easy, very simple, and keep it very on light toes, just in motion, not too much thinking. Just let photography happen. Don't overthink it, you know. That's sometimes really important, I think, also in advertising. Because that you take a lot of the beauty of photography out of photography when you overdo it. Here my personal, I work with him quite many times. Actually my favorite actor. And so the question is fame, you know. We met so many famous people over time that fame falls off. It's not important anymore. And I'm very, 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 very happy about that, because as a portraitist, when I meet someone here on the street, or I photograph, we did just a wonderful portfolio with veterans, World War II veterans here in Moscow. None of them is famous. For me, I get as excited with them as when I have a famous actor in front of me, and that's very liberating. So fame falls off. I mean, I spent my birthday with the Dalai Lama. I got cello lessons by Yo-Yo Ma. I played air guitar with Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin. And I met Stephen Hawking. That was fun until he drove over my foot. And listen what he had to say. Oh, I want to, nope. Not happening, just a second. So, I try that again. I don't know how that could, it doesn't happen. I want to show you this. I show you this because this is the most romantic moment I ever had with a guy.
Nice. Cool, man.
And I ever will have. So fame falls off. And as I said, it's very, very, very liberating. As a portraitist, I don't want to have fame in between me and any person. And when I see a good subject, I get very, very nervous. And this week with the veterans, I get very, very nervous. At this stage, I want to actually thank Elena and Katarina from Focus Films a name agency. They made the link here to BBDO. They said, this is the best agency in Moscow. And that being said, I want to go in this. So Napoleon Bonaparte said, history is a set of lies we all agree to agree upon. And I think this is very cynical, but in a way very, very true. And I cannot live with that fact. I think we all should work to make history kind of more science. And the camera, they say, is an unlikely weapon. And when you can carry a camera, you can carry the responsibility to show good and the bad. You have to show what's happening in this world beyond what personally sometimes touches you, or in the biggest, a bigger scale of things. So a couple of years ago, I decided to work for United Nations Mine Action Service. There's 180 million landmines in the world, and about the same amount of pieces of unexploded ordnance. And we started that work actually in Afghanistan 6 years ago by now. And after we started this, it became a really big passion of mine. And so over the last couple of years, we try to inform the public about the subject of landmines. And as I said, it is my responsibility, and here it's only a little audience, but always little by little, people come to understanding how big that problem is. For example, this guy, he lost his face literally when a rocket exploded. She lost both of her legs, both of his legs, and his actually two of his brothers died at the same incident. We went to South Sudan, and the beauty there was like that we photographed cattle with cattle people, and they are extremely exposed to landmines because they feed with their cattle around, they move their cattle around, and so they are very, very exposed to landmines. Here you see, like, so we spent time with them, and it's a very great change for me from movie stars to this. And after photographing this, the next destination, we actually went to NASA. And so it's beautiful that my life is sometimes in such extremes. Of worst of all those places, they always say one travel changes your life. And my big actually change in my life was Cambodia, which kind of moved me more than I could possibly explain here. And I want to show you a little bit of a little impression of that. So stuff like that, I have to put that in to tell you that. We do in very improvised circumstances. Sometimes we have no electricity for 2 weeks. We have no shower for a week. We look like a bunch of pirates. But the pictures you saw now or just before mean more to me than any of the other pictures I've done in my life before. Because it's my little chance. There's not much I can do as a photographer, but the one thing I can do is show people like you what's happening out there, and I take that extremely serious.
I had thrown out other first pitches, and I knew what it was like to throw a pitch with a bulletproof vest on, and felt pretty confident that I'd be able to make the pitch. At the time, Jeter comes in and says, "You're going to throw from the mound." And I said, "What do you think?" He said, "Well, if you don't throw from the mound, they'll boo you." And I said, "Okay, I'll throw from the mound." And as he left, he said, "Don't bounce it, they'll boo you." So I've got his words echoing in my mind. I was on the dugout steps, introduced in front of the crowd, and the noise was deafening. I made it to the mound, and it was the most nervous I had ever been. It's the most nervous moment of my entire presidency, it turns out. The adrenaline was just coursing through my veins, and the ball felt like a shot put. And Todd Green, the catcher, looked really small. I mean, 60 feet 6 inches seemed like a half mile. And anyway, I took a deep breath and threw it, and thankfully it went over the plate. And the response was overwhelming. It was really one of the most dramatic moments of my presidency.
So when I'm the one to record for the world how an American president who started 2 wars states that throwing a baseball is the most nervous he has been in his whole entire presidency, gives my life as a storyteller a purpose. So I want to end this with a sort of conclusion. So it could be like this. Always love your country, never trust your government. And last but not least, don't obey your parents. Good night and good luck. Yeah, question. Is there any questions?
Questions?
As we can see, in most of the films, you are the camera or administration. Are you doing directing or screenwriting?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, normally now I don't do any camera work myself anymore with the motion camera, or not much, or only documentaries. The space movie I'm directing, co-directing with Joel Schwartz, who's a very successful documentarist. Yeah, and I direct the commercials just lately for Netflix and stuff like that. So that changed a lot, and to be honest, I work with a director of photography there, and I really enjoy it to give that away. And motion is a very different, really different thing than still camera. I have a clear idea of what the picture should look like, but then again, it's a different thing to have it in motion.
It needs to be sort of natural development for the photographer to become a movie person, because a lot of photographers become directors.
Well, I mean, but Albert Watson did movies way back in the day. So did a lot of photographers. Herb Ritz did commercials and music videos in the 80s. I think there were people who did it, and it has nothing to do with having a Canon Mark II or Mark III now, or whatever. It was just people who wanted to have that motion element in their lives. And now everyone thinks they can do it, but it's actually it's a craft. And you know, David Lynch said, and I totally agree with him, he said, like, when people say, how many photographers are there now? There's so many cameras, how many photographers are there? David Lynch said, how many pieces of white paper are there and pens? And how many great stories are written? Actually, very few. You have to applaud to David Lynch. That's not, unfortunately not mine. I think it's really clever, but it's true. There's just a few good stories.
One question here. You obviously work a lot and you travel a lot. And the question is a bit personal. Do you have time for a family?
Well, yeah. I'm here with my girl, so that's good. She enjoyed. I must say, by the way, at this occasion, I I really love, that's true for Celeste too, we really love Moscow. I think it's an incredible place. It's an incredible city. I travel sometimes in some years 290 days a year. I think Moscow is one of the most incredible cities I know personally. And you have to, with good friends, I called my friends yesterday, one of them, a couple times last week. I have a brother in Switzerland. You always miss people. But they don't want to have me miserable being in Switzerland either, So you pay your price, that's for sure. But to be honest, I enjoy traveling so much, still. So much. Seriously, the idea to go back to New York next week, we go to Baikonur tomorrow, but after that, it's only fun because we see friends and I have a little rest there, but normally,
Thank you for the story. That was insane.
Thank you.
Have some technical questions. How many people do you have in your team, or do you have outsourced work from the people from project to project, or you just have a permanent team of people you work with? Thank you.
As a permanent team, I have one person, which was for 6 years my first assistant, Tara Rice. She has her last day actually tomorrow. She moves on to be a photographer after 6 years. I have a new person. He was trained over the last 3 months. For me, it's always the lesser people you are, the better. Okay, you have to be light-footed, you have to be quick, you have to have little equipment, do it in camera, not too much, because there's just a lot of talk, a lot of drag. Go and be creative more than a big machine. When we do movie posters, I work in a team of, I have 6, 7, 8 assistants, If we did Tron Legacy, Avengers, all this stuff, it's a complete different thing. But portraiture is a very intimate thing, and every pair of eyes and everyone breathing in the room distracts actually the person. And that's not important whether you're the most famous actor or a veteran in a restaurant like yesterday, So very light. Also, when you have a lot of money, that doesn't mean that you need a big machine. In advertising, sometimes my client says, "Oh, we can do this and this," and I say, "No, don't spend that money. We don't need a trailer. We don't need that shit. We need just like a good mood and have good working conditions, and that's so much better." My producer people probably go like, "Oh no, don't say that," but
of course.
Well, thank you.
Too many technical questions in that. Sorry for that. Just have a question about the retouch you have. So you told that you don't like it much, and well, in the case when you have the work that have to be retouched, pretty much like in advertising, for example. So do you have work with agencies or just do it by yourself? How do that work?
That's actually an interesting question and a very legitimate one, because I think I come from a film background, like photographing with film, and I would never, it's not that I wouldn't touch film again, but I like the idea of shooting digital. What I don't like is that you shoot like the amount of shots done, or if it goes into too much post-production. And everything you've probably seen of me, I did myself. Every picture is out there on the internet, probably I photographed and then retouched myself. Whatsoever, for advertising campaigns, like movie posters, or now we did a watch campaign with Pierce Brosnan, and then I'm happy that there's a retoucher which does pretty much what I tell him to do as little as possible. But I don't want to be in between there. I don't want to be in between Pierce, his agent, the client, and the retoucher. You know, it's. Okay, well, I thank you very much for coming, and I hope you wake up after a while again. Okay, bye-bye.